guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie and today I'm going to be giving you my March wrap up. I read 20 books in March. I'm on a roll and it's amazing. I know a lot of people are reading a lot more right now because of social distancing and self-isolation, but my life really hasn't changed that much because I usually stay at home anyway and I'm an online student, so I don't have to go to classes or anything like that. So my life really hasn't changed that much, except I'm no longer working a couple days a week. So there's no particular reason why I read so much this month. It just kind of happened. Because I read so many books this month, I'm going to try and get through this quickly, so I'm just going to go straight on into the books that I read. First, I randomly decided to read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. I've never read these books before, and they're those books that you feel like you have to read at some point in your life. And of course I've seen all the movies, but I've never read the books, and I mean, this cover is absolutely beautiful. I could not resist when I was at Barnes & Noble the other day, so I know I'm supposed to be on a buying ban, but let me just tell you that during this self-isolation period, I did not stay true to that buying ban. Again. But whatever, this isn't a book haul, this is a wrap up, and I read both of these books this month and they were enjoyable. Honestly, they weren't quite what I expected. I mean, I expected them to be a lot more crazy and wild and out there than what it actually was. And I knew they were kids' books, but I didn't expect them to be written towards an audience that was that young. I still enjoyed them nonetheless, but I didn't give them a rating just because I didn't want to. Like, they weren't bad, but they weren't that memorable. Like, I really don't remember hardly anything that happens in this book, and most of the things that I do remember are because they're also in the movies, so take that how you will. Next, I read a young adult comic book, Miss Marvel Metamorphosis by G. Willow Wilson. I've already returned this book to the library, so I don't have it with me, but I did enjoy it. It wasn't quite to par of what I was expecting. It was good. I gave it 4 stars, but it didn't quite blow me away. But I will say that it's a lot better than the other YA comics that I've read in the past year. Most of the time I don't really enjoy them that much because I don't feel like there's any character depth or development, but this one I felt like did do a good job at that. I think the reason why I just didn't absolutely love it though is because of the plot. It wasn't that particularly interesting and it was predictable, and there were several different stories within this overall story, and I liked the first few more, but as I continued more on into the book, I really just didn't care for what was happening, and I only continued reading it just to say I finished it. So I liked the beginning, didn't really like the end, but meet in the middle, gave it 4 stars because I did really like the character development. I like seeing more of Miss Marvel's character because I don't know much about her at all, and I didn't really realize who she was honestly until I read this book, so I feel like I'm more educated in the comic universe. Next, I read an adult mystery thriller novel, and that is And Then They Were None by Agatha Christie. I've only read one Agatha Christie book before this one, and that was Murder on the Orient Express, and I had to read it for school when I was in high school, and I really enjoyed that one even though it was required reading, and so I've been wanting to read more Agatha Christie. I know she's a very famous classic mystery thriller author, and she started all of the tropes that we see in books today, so I've been wanting to read another one of her books, and this is one that my friend Olivia over at Olivia's Catastrophe recommended to me. She really enjoyed it and she thought that I would as well, so I made this one higher up on my priority TBR, and I finally got to it this month. The best way I can describe this book is Clue. If you've ever played the board game Clue, or if you've seen the movies, that's pretty much exactly what this was. And because of that, I felt like I had a better idea of what was happening in this book. Essentially, all these random strangers are gathered up and sent to this island for a dinner, and they don't know really why they've been asked to come. They don't know who their host is, they don't know each other, but they're sitting at this dinner, and then they find out the reason why they've all been brought together is because someone is claiming that they're all murderers. Whoever has brought them here to this isolated island knows all their secrets and knows realize that they're hiding some dark things in their past, and whoever this person is seeking justice. They are the only people on this island, and then slowly the dinner guests start to be murdered. So like someone amongst them has to be the killer, and then of course you as the reader have to figure out who it is. And I will say that I guessed who it was. I didn't really know how it happened and how they were able to, you know, be the mastermind behind all of this and how it actually unfolded, but I guess who the killer was, and I didn't really find it that disappointing even though I guessed who it was. It was still interesting, it still kept me on my toes, and considering Agatha Christie is probably the first person who used this trope and this story concept, is just like, I mean, she's got to be brilliant, you know? So for those reasons, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Y'all, I'm really struggling with my braces. Like, whenever I film videos now, like, my lips catch on my braces, and I don't know why. Because when I'm having conversations face to face with people in, like, real life, it doesn't happen. But for some reason, when I'm filming, like, it just feels awkward. It feels awkward. If you don't know, I just got braces a month ago for the 2nd time in my life, and it's a little frustrating because I didn't expect to get braces again as an adult, but here we are. Anyway, you guys don't care. The next book I read in March was The Iron Queen by Julie Kagawa. I've been buddy reading the Iron Face series with my friend Elle from Bookish Elle. We have had a great time reading the series. I say that in like every video, but it's true. This is book 3 out of 4 in the series, and I really enjoyed it, but quite honestly, it felt like a finale. Like, it felt like the story should have ended here because the ending was just so big and so grand, and it felt like a finale book. So I'm very interested to see what the 4th book has in store because I honestly have no idea. This is an old YA fantasy series following fae or fairies, and it's set half in like the fairy world, half in the human world, and it's very interesting, very unique, and like fun and lighthearted. And there's an angsty love triangle, which is always fun. This is like the epitome of old YA. I think I've been giving every book in this series so far 4 out of 5 stars, but this one I actually gave 5 stars. I wouldn't say it's a full 5-star for me. If I had to give it a half rating, I would probably give it 4.5. But this has probably been my favorite book in the series, obviously, because I read it higher than the others. This month we also read Summer's Crossing, which is the 2nd novella in this series, and this novella bind up the Iron Legends. And this one follows the 2 love interests, and I really liked their perspectives more than the main character of the series because, let's be real, y'all, she's super annoying, and I don't particularly care for her perspective. So reading this novella was so much fun. And even though the 2 boys in the love triangle are supposed to be enemies because they're fighting for the same girl, they're both in love with the same person, they also just have this really fun friendship, and I love seeing their interactions together. It's a great time. Next, I listened to the audiobook for Between the Lines by Jodi Picoult. This is one that I just kind of decided to listen to randomly. It's one that's kind of been on my TBR for several years now, but I never thought that I would actually get to it. But I saw that Libby had it on audiobook, and I decided, why not? This month I also participated in the FairytaleAthon readathon, and this is a book that I read for one of the prompts. I felt like it was kind of fitting because this book follows a girl who is reading a childhood fairy tale storybook when she discovers that the prince main character in the story is actually alive, and he's trying to escape his story because he wants to be a real human. And so like the whole book is the reader falling in love with the character and the character falling in love with the reader, and that's just like every reader's like dream concept, that your favorite character is actually alive and you can pull them out of the story in order to have a romantic relationship with them. Like, I feel like that's every reader's dream, even if you don't admit it. Because let's be real, y'all, book characters, particularly book love interests, are way better than people in real life because they're like essentially perfect. You know, we're all flawed, but a lot of times book characters are portrayed as perfect, and they may have a flaw here and there because the author has to throw in something. But in general, the love interests of stories always say the right things, they always do the right things, they're always doing like really cute romantic gestures that people in real life just don't do. So the story concept of Between the Lines is like just great. I will say the execution wasn't, you know, the greatest. It was very cheesy, very cliche, and it kind of felt like it was written towards people of like the younger side of YA, which is understandable because Jodi Picoult actually wrote this book with her younger daughter. So I don't really know how old her daughter was at the time of writing this, but I'm assuming that she was somewhere around 10, I could be completely off, but just the way the story was told, it felt like her daughter, who was helping her write the story, was really young. Overall, I enjoyed it though, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read another random book, also for the FairytaleAthon, and that was Beauty and the Beast Lost in a Book, an Enchanting Original Story by Jennifer Donnelly. I was walking through Walmart with my mom before all, the self-quarantine stuff happened, and I saw this book, and I was like, oh, Mom, I kind of want that book. Should I get it? And she's like, I'll buy it for you. I was like, okay. And so it was sitting on my shelf all alone because I hadn't yet put it in its proper place on my shelves yet. And I kept staring at it, and I was like, you know what? It's FairytaleAthon. This is a retelling. I need to read this for FairytaleAthon. So I did, and it wasn't the greatest. I mean, it was fun, it was cute. If you like Beauty and the Beast and you just want to re-enter the world of Beauty and the Beast, this is probably one that you will enjoy, but if not, you probably wouldn't like it that much. Essentially, this follows Belle as she's in the castle being held captive by the Beast, but behind the scenes you have sisters Death and Love, and they make a bet against each other that Love can make Belle fall in love with the Beast before the rose falls, and Death is determined to interfere to keep Belle from falling in love with Beast before the last petal falls. So she decides to plant this magical book into the library, and of course Belle loves to read, and she loves the gigantic library in the Beast castle, so she's always in there reading, and she comes across this magical book that, unbeknownst to her, is like spelled, and so she opens the book, and it's actually like a portal into Death's realm, but it's disguised as this wonderful, magical, beautiful place that Belle can escape to when she's feeling sad or worried about her dad, and she's just really lonely in the castle and she wants to leave. She can always go into this book to escape her reality. But she of course doesn't know that this world within this magical book is a disguise for Death's realm, and Death is trying to keep her trapped there, that way she can't fall in love with Beast, and then that way Death will win the bet against her sister Love. And it's just like a really unique concept. It's really fun, but it's very cheesy, very corny, very childish. I would say this is another book that's written towards the younger end of the YA audience, but if it sounds like something that you would enjoy, you should check it out. I give this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read another comic which I loved, and that is Wonder Woman Origins Volume 1 by Renee DeLise and Ray Dillon. This was one of the best comic books that I've ever read, and granted, I haven't read a lot of them, but I really enjoyed this one. I loved the story, I loved the artwork, and I've read another Wonder Woman Origins comic book before, and I've watched the Wonder Woman film, and I like this origin story better than those. So I think that's why I enjoyed this so much, because it was different but not too different, and it had a lot of story elements that I personally enjoy more. And this origin story follows Diana from the time she's like a little toddler girl to the time she's like probably like 20 years old. This book was a lot longer than I expected. It took me several hours longer than it usually takes me to read a comic book or a graphic novel, but I enjoyed like every second of it. The artwork wasn't like the greatest thing I've ever seen, but I really loved the way the artist drew Diana. Like, there's something about the way they drew this character that just gripped me, and like I couldn't stop staring at her eyes. Like, wow. Like, this doesn't do it justice. Like, you just have to read this book to know what I'm talking about. Anyway, really enjoyed this one. 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I finally read All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. This is one that I've owned for like 5 years. And like, I always would like have some type of interest in reading it, but then I would hear a negative review and I was like, I think I'll read something else. But because of the movie adaptation, I felt more like desire to actually read it, and I did. And what was I thinking? Why was I listening to negative reviews when I knew this would be something that I probably would like? Because y'all, I really enjoyed this one, and I can understand why some people don't like it. It's not for everyone, and I can understand why people would say it's problematic, because it does deal with some heavy topics like suicide and depression. So just be forewarned about that if you're thinking of reading this book or watching the movie, because that's essentially what the story is about. It follows 2 teenage characters who are both struggling with their mental health and some mental illness, and they're both experiencing suicidal ideation, and essentially they save each other literally and figuratively. It's a very beautiful, heartwarming story, but I will say that I can definitely see why some people say it's problematic. I don't want to promote the way this book handles mental illness, but at the same time, it's just a good book. I really enjoyed it, so therefore I did give it a high rating. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, probably more of a 4.75, but I'm glad I finally read it, and I'm upset with myself that I put it off for so long because I did really enjoy it. Like I said, there are several things in this book that could be seen as problematic, and I agree with some of them and disagree with others, but I will say that one thing that personally bothered me is one of the main characters has a mental illness, and he doesn't want to get help. He doesn't want to acknowledge his mental illness because he stigmatizes mental illness himself. Which is weird to say because pretty much the entire book is trying to get the message across that, you know, we shouldn't stigmatize mental illness. But yet, in a way, I felt like this book was teaching people who do have mental illness that they shouldn't reach out for help even when they want it or even when they need it. They should just try to do things alone. And if they are experiencing suicidal ideation, that they should keep it to themselves. They shouldn't tell anyone because they shouldn't want to get help. That was kind of the message that came across to me from one character, but all the other characters said a different message. They presented, you know, a more positive, uplifting message, which was kind of contradicting, but I still enjoyed the story nonetheless. But I did want to kind of wrap this one up a little bit more critically, even though I rated it higher. Next, I read a bunch of books in the Shatter Me series by Tahira Mafi because I love this series so much. And if you don't know, several months ago I decided to reread the first 3 books in the series. It's the original 3 books. It used to just be a trilogy. The 3rd book was the big finale. And I think pretty much everyone was pleased with how the story wrapped up. And then several years later, Tahira Mafi decided to write more books in the series. So some people are upset. I'm just a little upset. I did really enjoy these books for the most part that I'm about to start talking about, but I also in a way wish I hadn't read them because things just happen and the story's different, the characters are different, and I wish like my idea of the story hadn't been changed, you know, like if you read them you know what I'm talking about. I know a lot of people are very upset by the ending of this series. Oh gosh, you just gotta read it. And for all of you fans who have yet to read the 6th final book that was just released, prepare yourselves, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't say that. Go into it with an open mind. I just personally didn't like the last book, which isn't even in this wrap up, so what am I even doing? I'm getting a month ahead of myself because I just finished that last book yesterday. But I did read all the other stories up until the 6th book that was just released on March 31st, not April. It's April now. And those books include Restore Me, which is book 4, Shatter Me, which is novella 4.5, Define Me is book 5, and then Reveal Me is novella 5.5. I really liked these novellas. I felt like they added a lot to the story, so if you didn't read those when you were, you know, like chronological order when you were supposed to, then you might be a little confused at the beginning of Define Me. And you might be really confused at the beginning of the 6th book, Imagine Me, because like it's almost essential to read this one to really like know what people are talking about in the beginning of the 6th book, but once again, I'm getting a month ahead of myself here. I enjoyed these, but I wouldn't say they're anything like super special. And then when I separate these 2 books from the original trilogy, I did really enjoy these. I would probably say out of these 2, my favorite would be Restore Me. Things just get really crazy in Define Me, and then things get even crazier in the next book. It's kind of short and all over the place, but I did really like the ending of this book. This one I felt like was more thoroughly good throughout. I gave them 5 out of 5 stars, but they're nowhere near as good as the original trilogy in my opinion. I'm glad I read these books to know how like the story ends and know what these characters have gone through since the original finale. But I almost wish I would have just stuck with the original trilogy. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read the continuation books. Let me know what you think. Like, do you feel the same way as me, or, you know, did you really enjoy these? But avoid spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the series and read your comment. Next, I randomly decided to reread Under the Never Sky and Through the Evernight by Veronica Rossi. These are books 1 and 2 in the Under the Never Sky trilogy, which I read like 2 or 3 years ago now, and I really loved it, and I just decided to randomly reread them because I wanted to know if I still would love them as much now as I did then, because I really, really liked them and I felt like they were very underrated, and I do stand by that. I think this is a very underrated dystopian trilogy, but this second time around I noticed a lot more flaws. That didn't affect my enjoyment really, and honestly, like, I forgot so much that happened in these books that it was almost like reading them for the first time again. I think the biggest problem I had with these was the relationship felt very much like insta-love the second time around, because it's not even something that I noticed the first time, and this time I was like, oh my god, like it's been like a week and now they're like really into each other and they like love each other and everything, and I'm like, is that realistic? No. But I devoured it anyway. I really, really love these, and I highly recommend them if you enjoy like old YA dystopian. Essentially in this series the world has been destroyed by ether storms, but they managed to create these dome pod cities for the elite population to live in, and then everyone else outside the dome cities were just screwed. But technology has advanced so much that people in these pods, because they can't have a real life in the outside world, they've never even set foot in a real forest or like seen real trees or anything like that before. Like, they've never experienced real rain or anything like that. Their whole entire concept of the world is through virtual reality, like goggle eyepiece things, and it's really interesting to be inside the head of someone who has never really experienced life except through virtual reality. And like, their concept of the world is so screwed up. Anything I say about anything in this plot is gonna give away the book. Something happens towards the beginning that, you know, disrupts the main character's world, and she has to start interacting with people on the outside. So these people are known as savages, and there's all kind of crazy stories about them. Obviously when you hear the word savage you can imagine what they think of the people on the outside, because it's not a nice term. It's a crazy, fun, unique adventure. And next, I reread one of my favorite books of all time. You guys know, Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. It's my favorite. Like, not this particular book, but you know, the series is my favorite. And I'm rereading this series with my friend Elle at Bookish Elle, because if you've watched my channel, you know I talk about it in like every video. But we're reading her favorite books, the Iron Face series, which it's my first time reading that series. And then we're also reading my favorite series, her first time reading it. And, you know, like, I'm never going to pass up the opportunity to reread this series. You know, this is just an excuse. This is just an excuse for me to reread my babies. And I just finished a reread of the series and I'm starting it all over again. So, yeah. I don't feel like I have to say anything about this series, but if you don't know, this is a YA fantasy series following a young female teenage assassin named Selena Sardathian as she like kicks butt and defeats evil. Y'all know how much I love it. Next, I had another buddy read and another reread for me. That's Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. This is book 2 in the Hunger Games trilogy. I'm buddy reading this series with Lacey over at Lacey D. Bell, and you know, like, this is my first time rereading this series and I'm still really enjoying it, but not as much as I did the first time around, not gonna lie. Particularly this book, because I've always thought that it's my favorite in the series, and you know, I think now looking back, the reason why it's my favorite is because the movie is so good. I didn't realize what little time you spend in the games in the second book. Like, the majority of the book is just them doing a whole lot of nothing. You know, like, you're following little parts of the rebellion budding, you know, but for the most part they're just going around different places in the districts in the capital, and it's not as exciting as I thought it was. The ending of this book is by far the best when they're in the actual games, but it's really just like maybe like this far, who knows. Like, it's really not a lot, which I wasn't expecting. Nonetheless, I still really love this series and I still really love this book, just not as much as I did the first time around and not as much as I thought. Next, I seriously randomly just picked up this book because it's another book that was like off on its own on my shelf because I recently bought it and it was just sitting right there all alone, and I needed something to read. I wanted something light, fluff, cute, funny, you know, romantic. It was just late at night and I was tired of all the fantasy I was reading, and I saw it on the shelf. So I read it, and I didn't even realize that this was the second book in a companion trilogy, which I'm thankful it's just a companion trilogy because now I'm in the middle of reading the first book, and I'm glad that I'm not completely spoiled for it, but I'm spoiled just a little bit. But regardless, I really enjoyed this book. You know, it's not the greatest book of all time by any means. I guess I should say what this book is. Fame, Fate, and the First Kiss by Casey West. I'm enjoying all of Casey West's books. She's a YA contemporary author that has like some really cute ones out there, and people either love her or, you know, people think her books are meh. And I can see both opinions, both perspectives, but at the end of the day, they're just really cute and really fun reads. So if you want something light and fluffy and quick, I recommend her books. This book follows a teenage girl who's an up-and-coming actress. She's been in a commercial and she starred in several plays throughout her life, but this is her first movie deal. And this could be the kickstart of her career because her co-star is actually a super famous teenage heartthrob actor, but someone on the set is trying to sabotage her and sabotage her career and get her potentially kicked off the movie. And while this is happening, she's having some family issues and things aren't so great at home, and she has a rocky relationship with her parents right now, and she's also still in high school, so she's having to complete her schoolwork while she's on the movie set, and she's not doing too great, and she's not really doing her homework, so her dad forces her to have a tutor, and romance ensues, and it's really adorable. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. And lastly, this month I read Sherwood by Megan Spooner. I started reading this book for the FairytaleAthon and then never finished it until like the last day of March. I had really super high hopes for this one because I read Hunted by Megan Spooner last year and absolutely loved it. And so I had very high expectations for this one. It's a female retelling of Robin Hood, and it was very disappointing, not gonna lie. I ended up giving this one 3 stars because I enjoyed it overall, but it's so slow, and this book does not look like it, but it's huge, and it's so completely unnecessary. And then just like the ending, there's like a shift in the story, and it doesn't make sense. It's not very well executed. The romance in this book, like, it's like, what? What is happening? That's what I was thinking to myself while reading this book. What is happening? Why? What is going on? You know, it's just like a whole lot of confusing and like, what? I think half of this book could have been thrown out and I would have loved it a whole lot more. And like, I don't even think it was my high expectations that let me down. I mean, I do think it, you know, that was a part of it, but even if I didn't have high expectations for this book, I would have been very disappointed. You know, it was like decent. I told myself that if it ended really well, if I really liked the ending, that I would give it 4 stars, but the ending made it worse. So I just, why? I was hoping that this would be a new fairy tale retelling favorite, and it's not. I wouldn't really recommend reading this one unless you just have a thing for Robin Hood. But if you're interested in reading this author's books, I highly recommend Hunted by Megan Spooner, which is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Alright guys, those are all of the books that I read in the month of March. That's 20 books, and that's novellas and comics, but regardless, it's 20 things, books, and I did not expect to read that many. I'm just loving it though. It just gets me so excited. If you're watching this, you probably have just as much a love for reading as I do, and you probably know what I'm talking about. Like, the more you read, the more excited you get to read more books. It's just like, we just all love books and it's the best, okay? Let me know in the comments down below what are some of the books that you've been reading lately, and let me know like what your favorite book that you've read recently was. And I know all of y'all are reading a ton of books right now because of quarantine and self-isolation, so I know y'all have been reading some good ones. Just let me know how you are. I want to know how you are. It's been so long since I've really been on my channel, and it's been a long time since I've interacted with any of you, and I want to make sure you're okay. So if you're doing good, let me know. And if anyone wants to message me, feel free. My Twitter is linked in the description of this video. I'm always open to talking and interacting with y'all, especially if you're going through a really hard time right now. Just let me know and we can talk about it, and maybe I can help in some type of way.
We're all in this together.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more bookish content by me. I hope y'all have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.